What would you do if the love of your life disappeared without a word? What if they walked away, leaving you wondering if you ever truly meant anything to them at all? Imagine years of silence, and then suddenly they're back standing in front of you, ready to confess everything. Would you listen? Would you forgive them? Hi, my name is Sophia, and I'm 36 years old. I have been working as a freelance writer and editor for the past 10 years. On the outside, everything seems perfectly fine. I live in a cozy apartment in the heart of the city. I have a few close friends, and I work from home, which gives me the freedom to do what I love. But for all the outward appearances of stability, something's missing. Something has been missing for years. I never thought I'd be here. When I married James, I imagined our life together as a picture-perfect story, one filled with love, success, and endless laughter. We were both ambitious, both hardworking, and we had big dreams of building a life that we could both be proud of. But life doesn't always go according to plan, does it? I was just 28 when James and I met. It was a whirlwind romance. He was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Handsome, charming, and so easy to talk to. We fell in love quickly. The kind of love that makes you feel like you've known the person forever, even if it's only been a few months. Before I knew it, we were engaged and then married. At the time, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. But then, as the years went on, things started to change. Not quickly, but slowly, like a distant storm building on the horizon. We both worked long hours. He was a corporate lawyer, while I was making my way up in the world of freelance writing and editing. At first, we balanced work, love, and life, but eventually, the balance tipped. I spent more time on deadlines, more time in front of my computer, and less time with James. He was buried in his cases, and I was buried in my assignments. There were fewer dinners out, fewer spontaneous trips, and much more silence. But I told myself it was just a phase, that everything would go back to normal once we had more time. But that time never came. It started with a simple conversation. One that I didn't think was going to change anything. It was a typical Tuesday evening. I had just finished a project and was sitting at the kitchen table, eating leftovers from a few nights ago. James came home late, his tie loosened, his jacket thrown over his arm. I looked up from my plate, trying to smile, but something in his eyes stopped me. "Soph," he said, sighing heavily as he ran a hand through his hair. "We need to talk." I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling a knot in my stomach. It was one of those moments that people warn you about, when the weight of unspoken words hangs heavily in the air, and you realize that something you've been ignoring has finally caught up with you. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice tentative, unsure of what was to come. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice quiet, almost hesitant, "about everything, about us." I looked at him, searching his face, trying to understand what he was saying. But his words didn't make sense. "What do you mean?" I asked, now putting my fork down and sitting up straighter. "James, what's going on?" "We're fine. We're just busy, but we always get through it." He shook his head, running a hand over his face, and I felt the first spark of fear ignite in my chest. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. "It's not that simple anymore," he said, his eyes avoiding mine. "I've been trying to make it work. Trying to convince myself that we're okay. But I'm not happy, Sophia. I'm not the man I thought I was. And I'm not sure I'm the man you need anymore." My heart sank. Those words, "I'm not happy," echoed in my mind. But before I could respond, before I could say anything that might fix this, he continued, "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Sophia. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I don't think I can stay in this marriage. Not like this." The moment everything changed, and just like that, my world came crashing down. In that moment, I felt a crushing sense of loss that I didn't even know was possible. The man I had loved, the man I had built my life around, was telling me that he couldn't do it anymore. He wasn't just telling me he was unhappy. He was telling me that he wanted to leave. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "But I need space, Sophia. I need time to figure things out. I don't know if this is the end for us, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend that I'm okay when I'm not." The words hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating everything between us. I tried to say something, to fight for us, but my words stuck in my throat. All I could do was sit there, staring at him, feeling as though the floor had been pulled out from under me, and just like that, he left. I had no warning. No explanation, no warning signs to prepare myself. One moment, I was married to the man I loved, and the next, he was gone. The aftermath, the days that followed, were a blur. The apartment I once shared with James felt empty. His absence was felt in every corner, every room. I spent hours walking around, picking up pieces of our life, but it didn't feel real. I couldn't make sense of what had happened. The loneliness crept in slowly, like a shadow that grew darker every day. I thought I would be able to handle it, that I could go on as I always had. But every night when I lay down in bed alone, I realized that something inside me had broken. I didn't know how to fix it. The first few months after James left were the hardest. I tried to stay busy. I threw myself into my work, buried myself in projects, but there was a void. I felt lost, like a part of me was missing. The fear of facing life without him was consuming. I couldn't escape the thoughts of him, wondering where he was, if he was happy, if he ever thought about me. But through it all, one thing remained. He had promised he'd return. That promise kept me holding on. It was the only thing that kept me from completely falling apart. I convinced myself that he would come back. He would realize he made a mistake and come back to me. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. I waited, but he never came. The first few months after James's departure were a haze. I tried to keep moving, tried to keep my life going in some semblance of normalcy, but everything felt different. The days blended into one another, each one a repetitive cycle of work, silence, and exhaustion. I couldn't seem to escape the weight of what had happened. I told myself that I was doing okay, that I didn't need him, but deep down, I was haunted by unanswered questions. What happened to the man I married? Was he really done with me? And most of all, why hadn't he come back? He promised me he would return, but he didn't. He hadn't reached out at all. It wasn't just the loss of a partner. It was the loss of the person I thought I could rely on. The person I thought knew me better than anyone else in the world. The silence from James, the radio silence, as I began calling it, was suffocating. I kept wondering if maybe he was just going through something I didn't understand. Maybe he needed space, time to find himself, or maybe he was just waiting for me to give him that space. But nothing came. I was left with my thoughts and the void he left behind. Building my life again, work became my refuge. And while I kept myself busy, the weight of my emotions pressed down harder each day. The one thing that helped was the constant distraction of my job. As a freelance writer and editor, I had the flexibility to take on more projects. But even that didn't provide the comfort I needed. It was just a way to silence my mind, to keep from thinking about the things I didn't want to think about. And then a year passed. I didn't hear from James, not a single phone call, no messages, not even an email. I had spent so long imagining what might be happening on the other side. Maybe he was going through something difficult and didn't know how to reach out. But still, the silence was becoming unbearable. The questions I'd asked myself for months. Why did he leave? What was his reason? Does he still care? Remained unanswered. The pain of the abandonment was worse than the actual leaving. It was the not knowing. It was the feeling that I didn't matter enough for him to tell me why during that year. I tried to rebuild my life, recreate some semblance of normalcy. But every time I started feeling somewhat at peace, there it was again, the silence. It came crashing back in waves, reminding me that the life I had once known was gone. The first signs of change, but just when I thought I had come to terms with things, when I thought I was finally accepting my life without James, something unexpected happened. I had just returned from a short weekend trip to visit my parents when I saw a message on my phone. The sender's name was James. My heart stopped for a moment. For months, I had convinced myself that I had moved on, that I didn't need him anymore, that I could survive without him. But seeing his name on my phone after all this time stirred something deep inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was fear. Fear of what he might say, fear of what he might ask. I opened the message, my heart racing. I've been thinking about you. I know it's been a long time, and I don't expect you to understand. But I want to talk. Can we meet? I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. He wanted to meet. After everything, after all the hurt and pain, he was asking to meet. He hadn't reached out to me in over a year, and now he was sending me a message like nothing had happened. The audacity, the nerve, my emotions were all over the place. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. What should I do? Should I meet him and get the answers I had been craving for so long? Or should I continue moving on with my life, letting him remain a distant memory? The thought of seeing him again, of hearing his voice, stirred something inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. But would it hurt too much? Would it bring up all the old feelings of betrayal and abandonment? The internal conflict over. The following days I was torn. Every part of me wanted to meet him, to get the closure I had never received. But another part of me was terrified of what I might find. What if I met him and everything was still broken? What if I had changed too much, or worse, what if he had changed too much? Every night I lay in bed, turning the conversation over in my mind, imagining all the things I would say to him if I saw him again. I imagined myself demanding the truth, confronting him with all the pain and confusion he had left me with. I imagined asking him why he had chosen to walk away and why it had taken him so long to reach out. But in the quiet moments, when I wasn't imagining confrontation, there was something else. A small part of me still loved him, and that love wasn't gone, no matter how hard I tried to suppress it. It wasn't easy to admit, but it was there, lingering beneath the surface. The truth was, I was still holding on to the growing anticipation. The days passed, and the decision to meet him became more and more pressing. I couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting might be the one thing that could bring closure to everything. It had been too long. I had suffered in silence for too long. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment I would finally understand why he left me. I found myself replaying everything in my mind, the good memories, the bad ones. The way he used to make me laugh, the way we used to dream about our future together. And then the way he left like it was nothing. I wasn't sure I was ready to see him. I wasn't sure I was ready to face all the emotions I had buried deep inside me. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I needed answers. I needed closure. I stood in front of the mirror that morning, staring at my reflection, and I made up my mind I would meet him. But little did I know that decision would change everything. The day I agreed to meet James felt surreal. I had spent days weighing my decision, battling my inner thoughts, and wondering if it was the right choice. Was I prepared to face him again after everything? The hurt, the betrayal, the years of silence. How could I possibly reconcile that? But at the same time, there was a part of me that needed to know. A part that was desperate for closure, for an explanation. I arrived at the cafe early, hoping that my anxiety would ease once I saw him. The place we had agreed to meet was one of those quaint little spots we used to visit regularly when things were good. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries filled the air, and for a moment I almost thought that maybe, just maybe, everything would return to the way it used to be. But that thought was fleeting. I sat at the table in the corner, my hands fidgeting in my lap. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the otherwise quiet space. Every minute felt like an eternity. I had not seen James in over a year, an entire year of unanswered questions, endless nights of wondering where he was and why he hadn't come back like he promised. My heart raced with anticipation, but also with the fear of facing the man who had once been everything to me. And then he walked in. The first meeting, James looked different. At first, I couldn't quite place it. He was still the same in some ways, the same broad shoulders, the same strong jawline, the same eyes that used to look at me with so much love. But there was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. It was as if the man I had known was hiding behind a mask, someone hardened by time, pain, and distance. His clothes were more relaxed than I remembered. No more tailored suits, no more polished shoes. I stood up to greet him, my legs trembling slightly beneath me. "James," I said softly, not knowing whether to hug him or just sit back down. Smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sophia," he replied, his voice softer than I remembered, almost apologetic. "It's been a long time," I nodded, the words choking in my throat. The tension between us was palpable, thick, enough to suffocate any attempt at a casual greeting. We both sat down, the space between us feeling vast, as if no amount of time or conversation could ever close the gap that had formed over the years. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was as though the weight of all the years apart had created an invisible wall, keeping us trapped in this uncomfortable silence. I wasn't sure how to begin. What do you say to someone who left without explanation, without even a goodbye? Finally, James broke the silence. His voice was low, his gaze fixed on the table between us. "I don't know where to start, Sophia. I've thought about this day for so long. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to leave you in the way I did. I felt a lump form in my throat, the way I did. He left me no explanation, no warning, no closure. He had walked out on me just like that. You just left, James," I said, my voice shaking slightly, without a word. "You promised me you would come back. You promised me we'd work through it. But you didn't. You never did." He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with regret. "I know, and I'm sorry. I wish I could take it back. But I couldn't come back, Sophia. Not then, not like that. I wasn't the man you needed me to be. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore." His words hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't just apologizing for leaving. He was admitting that he didn't know who he was. He had left because of something inside of him, but how did that make me feel? It didn't erase the pain. It didn't take away the years I had spent wondering what went wrong. Why didn't you tell me that then? Why didn't you give me the chance to help you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James's gaze dropped again. He ran his hand through his hair, visibly frustrated with himself. I didn't know how. I was scared, Sophia. I was scared that I wasn't enough for you. I was scared that if I didn't leave, I would just drag you down with me. I felt tears break at the corners of my eyes, but I forced them back. So you thought leaving was the answer? That leaving me behind was the best thing for both of us? He nodded slowly, the sadness in his eyes undeniable. I thought I was protecting you, but I was wrong. I know that now. I should have been honest with you. I should have stayed and faced everything, but I was a coward. The raw confession, the room felt like it was closing in on me. I had spent so many years wishing for this moment, imagining the confrontation, the explanation, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. I don't know if I can forgive you. James, I said quietly, the weight of those words pressing heavily on my chest. You broke me when you left. You left me alone with no answers, no explanation. You didn't just leave. You left me in pieces, trying to figure out what went wrong. James's expression crumpled with the raw pain in my words. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the table. I don't deserve your forgiveness, I know that. I don't deserve anything from you. But I need you to understand I never stopped loving you. His confession hit me like a tidal wave. I had spent years telling myself I was better off without him. I had convinced myself that I didn't need him, that I was stronger on my own. But hearing him say those words, hearing him admit that he still loved me, shattered the walls I had carefully built around my heart. Then why did you leave? I whispered, my voice breaking. Why did you leave me with nothing but questions? James looked at me, his eyes filled with pain and sorrow. I left because I thought I was saving you. But I was wrong. I thought I needed to figure myself out, but all I really did was hurt you. And now, all I can do is beg for your forgiveness if you're willing to give it. The decision, I sat back in my chair, staring at him, feeling like my heart was being pulled in 100 different directions. He was offering me the truth, the explanation I had wanted for so long, but could I trust him again? Could I let him back into my life after everything he had done? For a long time, I sat there in silence, the emotions swirling within me. I thought of all the years I had spent wondering why he had left, all the nights I had cried myself to sleep, and the years I had spent rebuilding my life without him. I need time. James, I said finally, my voice steady but filled with emotion. I can't just forgive you right away. I need to think about this. I need to figure out if I can ever trust you again. James nodded, his face full of understanding. I'll wait, Sophia. I'll wait for as long as it takes. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just needed to tell you the truth. I never stopped loving you, and I want to make it right. And as I sat there, staring at him, I realized that the decision wasn't about whether I could forgive him. The real question was, could I forgive myself for holding on to this pain for so long?